the sea. Okay,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, all right. Anyway, so what I think is we can get started because we are a few of us here already and we would like to.
Sorry. Oh,
Yes,
sorry. I just want to interrupt. When I heard about Busan, I was thinking about
yeah,
the movie Train
ex
to Busan. Train
exactly,
to Busan.
exactly. That's the thing, all the zombies and everything. Oh dear. Yes. And okay, so what we can do is we can go around and say what we think about the book or whatever. I mean, no hard and fast rules. Anybody can just chip in and say what they want to. So basically, we just want to say, Steph and I did try to get the author to come on board anytime, not for this discussion, but she's very busy with personal commitments and stuff like that. So hopefully sometime later in the year she'll be free, then we can get to talk to her. And
Roy, just before that, Chan Wai, she's here as a guest. She approached BBC
okay,
Facebook.
hi. All right,
So
welcome.
welcome.
Welcome, Miss Chan. Nice to see you here. What do we call you? Okay, Chan Wai. Okay, hi, Chan Wai. Okay. All right, so we're just getting started. So basically what we are looking at, nice to see you again, Tik. And yes, so what we are just talking about is we were saying that she had written this book earlier and it was as a short story or a story for one of, I think, the magazines. I think one of the stories was, then it kind of developed. And then according to what she wrote at the back of the book is that she had to revise and retell the whole story. And this was written before her first published book, but this is a second publication, a second book now. And basically, I think there are many of you here, especially people like Guy, who's been reading up a lot about Japan and Korea, and many of us also have friends, I think, who come from that background. My my experience with Korea is when I was in India. We had a lot of these Korean companies there in India, in Delhi. I was tutoring some of the children for English. So that's when I learned about kimchi. I learned about, a lot of things and a lot of things that went on inside the household, which made me very interested because they were like I remember one of the boys when he was studying, the two boys, just before we start, there were two boys I was teaching. So the elder brother's turn came later, but the younger one, he would want to come and sit to listen to what I was teaching the elder brother. And the mother was like, go out, brother's turn to study. Brother has to study and you have to study. And it was like, okay, yes, yes, And then I used to tell him, never mind, let him sit in. He can do something else while that happens. And then there was this typical, what do you call it? When I was reading Pachinko about the males and the females, I could see the distinction even in modern times, because when the father came in, it was a different way to look at things, and he would come in and he would talk to me in, a bit of broken English, but he was the one who did the talking, not the mother, and stuff like that. So it was quite interesting. But yes, and recently, because of a lot of research that I do about social media, I'm doing something on social media toxicity, and one of the main things that I'm researching is, BTS as well as Blackpink and the new models that have come in. So for us right now, Korea is a lot about Korean food, barbecue, and the boy bands and the girl bands, right? But there is so much that have gone into this. So it's really amazing, this entire white canvas of writing. And honestly speaking, when I was reading it, I didn't like it so much, but I still liked many parts of it. And I think we could identify where the human emotions and human struggles, human challenges were concerned. I think many of us could see, or we could relate to a lot of things that our parents, because we also as immigrant children, things that have gone on in their lives. And there were so many things about the women, especially. I actually have had seen such women in my life, but not in the Korean context, in the northeastern of India, so like Kungi, I don't know how you pronounce the name, Kungi and Sunja, they actually reminded me of people I know today, so that was amazing. And there were so many things that actually disturbed me. But what really, really took me off, have all of you read the book? by the way? Everybody
Yeah.
finished? Okay. Yeah, Karamjit, you haven't come to whatever. But what really shocked me and really, really broke my heart was Noah. What happened with Noah? That was like, honestly, totally. I suppose we should have expected it, but it was like, oh no, do I want to read on or not? Okay. All right. So that's what I want to say. But generally about the book, it's very big. You know, it's so many generations, like 3, 4 almost, because you have Solomon as well. Yeah. So a lot of things happening. So I'm sure all of you have a lot to say. I'll come back to this later. And yes, maybe you'd like to start, Cal? You want to say
Yeah,
anything,
I'd
Chris?
like
Yes,
to
please.
say that the remote little poverty-stricken Korean village is what held my interest
Okay.
because the later part she glossed over years and characters so fast that sometimes you lose track. So the earlier part was what was addictive for me. I was very addicted to not put down the book. And the other thing that I was schooled is the Japanese are bad people. I mean, they are so evil. I thought I didn't know this aspect of the Japanese, that they treat the Koreans like this. They have called them immigrants. They never lost that status, and that's why Noah killed himself. And that makes me very upset because when I went to Tokyo, they were such different people, the Japanese. But when I was talking to a friend about the Japanese, she said, but there are many aspects that they don't tell you. They behave in a certain way, but they are actually cast in a certain other way. That was revealed again and again and again. I mean, Noah's whole life was a lie. He married a wife and he didn't even tell her that he was not Japanese. He passed off as Japanese, and his children were Japanese, and he was Japanese. So apparently, that's what you go by, and that made me very unhappy. I didn't know because it schooled me in different ways because I didn't know this about the Japanese. And so it was educational about the Koreans, a lot of their culture, their history, their thoughts, but Japanese too, as well, a lot. So that's my bit. Thank you.
Hmm. Actually, Kel, I like the first part of the book a lot. Actually, that kind of held, I still think that's my favorite part rather than the later ones. And I think what you said about Japanese culture, I think many of us, you know, were you there for the discussion for Street of Thousand Blossoms?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was.
so that's where there's so many, I think many people actually talked about why how the Japanese are portrayed differently, yet now today they are different. I think a lot of things, even Aisali mentioned going to, I think, Japan and seeing the stuff. So I was actually thinking about that discussion as well. Yeah, thank you so much, Kel, for,
You're
and in between,
welcome.
of course, you can say anything as well. Yeah. So who would like to go next? Do you want me to just call out names, or would you like to volunteer?
You can pick on us.
Yeah, sure, sure. I can pick any. Why not you, Salat? Maybe we go with you.
Cool. Ah, now I'm on the spot. Usually I do the picking because I'm a teacher.
I see. Okay, all right.
But that makes me a terrible student, just to warn you. Okay. Look, well, I like the first part as well because it explains like what colonization meant, and I found that particularly interesting because I don't have a like a colony background. We did not colonize anyone. My country was never colonized, so I wouldn't even know what that means. All my knowledge about colonization is more like Western colonization, whereas of course Japanese did a lot of raids and they colonized Southeast Asia as well. So I learned a different aspect of it. So I quite like it. So I'm really interested in history, but I'm embarrassed to say in the West, you learn about West, whereas I'm really ignorant about Eastern, Southern Eastern history, like Asian history, and I'm willing to learn. So in that aspect, I love the book. I learned a lot of things. I learned a lot of traditions, how people lived in those days, what languages they used. I loved it. For Noah, a lot of things were okay. I was like, huh, that makes sense. This might have happened. But for Noah, I didn't buy Noah. So the last like 16, 17 years of Noah, nah, it's not real. Can't be. Like, it's not realistic. Why? Because Noah is a guy, well, son of a pastor, obviously, very honest, well behaved, and he's not into lying. So I can't imagine he faked a life for himself. So that was disappointing for me. I was sorry for his death, but nah, I kind of lost touch after he disappeared. For me, it's like it was a bit too much imagination. It doesn't correlate with the character if you read it from
Mhm.
the beginning. So I was disappointed with Noah. One more thing that disappointed me about the whole book was there was a lot of Japanese words in it, and when you're not Asian, I would say you don't understand what they are. So I would expect, I can't remember if the book was translation or not, but I would expect some footnotes to explain what they were, because there were so many times I had to stop and Google the words because I wanted to learn. But in the end, I gave up because it became really boring. It would kill my flow. So those were like my two, I think, critiques. I like the first part of the book as well. Second part,
Yeah.
still a page turner, but I felt like I was getting lost in the way, like too many characters, and are they going to
Yeah.
be significant in the story? Not really. Will something happen between Hansu and Sunja? I was expecting something bigger, and Sunja has too much pride, if you ask me. I don't think she cared about their child, like her children's future that much. So she failed me as a mother a few times.
Mhm.
I might be harsh, but yeah, it's a page turner, and I like the book, and I look forward to reading more about Korea and Japan. I think I've got too much to learn.
Thank you so much, Salad. That's interesting because I think there are many people who may share your views as well. And yeah, especially about that not buying the Noah thingy. I think somebody else also mentioned that to me when I was going on about Noah, earlier. And so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. So who would like to go next? Morag, would you like to go next? And then
I agree with a lot of that. I was kind of reading this and I quite enjoyed it, but I was reading all these like superlatives on the front cover, right? Going a masterpiece, rich, moving. And I was like, is this a different book? Because I'm not reading a masterpiece here at all. It's quite a nice story. I'm quite interested in the historical aspects. I also enjoyed the first part better because I thought the characters were better drawn. We kind of got an understanding of Sunja, and then when Isak comes along and they kind of move to Japan and the challenges that they face there, I was kind of quite interested in all of that. And I didn't think it's amazingly written, although that might just be because it's translated. It was a bit clunky in places, but I was kind of going with it as a story, which was kind of fun and not very hard to read and quite interesting, again, for the historical aspects. But I also kind of lost the way in the second half because there was too many characters.
Yeah.
They were sketched, they weren't fully drawn, and therefore I couldn't care about any of them very, very much. I felt they kind of came and went, like Hannah, she came, she went, what was that about? And again with Noah, I didn't buy that either, I didn't buy that. There's this kind of, obviously this reaction to discovering that Hansu was his father. Now, clearly that's going to be a shock, but his reaction to his mother, I just wasn't buying that. It seemed so out of character with what happened previously, and then him shooting himself. It was like, that's totally, I didn't buy that really. The younger brother, Moses, if you like, I thought he was quite an interesting character, and I'd have liked to have known more about him. I mean, if we just focused a bit more on his story, really, I'd have quite liked that, because again, those things that are kind of almost brushed over. He starts off in this pachinko parlor as a young man when he's dropped out of school and getting into trouble, and then suddenly he's kind of rich, and it's like, well, sort of what happened in the middle? We didn't really get that very well explained. How he went from I'm the kind of new kid in this team, and I'm doing pretty well, so suddenly I'm this millionaire pachinko owner, and so I thought there was too. She made the error to me of having too many characters, and then they weren't well enough drawn for me to really care very much about all of them. And I did care in the first half about Sunja, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the sister-in-law's name right, Kyun Hee, and all of those. And then it kind of lost its way for me, really. So, I mean, it was really fast to read. You know, if it had been slow going, I might have found it a bit harder, but it was really speedy. I mean, I read half of it this morning. It really was not hard to read. So, so that was okay, but I'm not. I don't know. I was disappointed because it's had such good reviews, and I didn't feel that I was reading a book that merited the kind of superlatives it's been endowed with, in all honesty. So I agree.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Morag. Okay, let's listen to the others before we. Steph, would you like to go first, or would you like me to ask somebody else first?
Others first, please.
Others. Okay. Wai, can we have your take, please?
I've not actually finished reading the book, because I only just found out about the meeting a few days ago, but I've started reading the first part. Yeah, I'm really interested in the history of Korea rather than what we see like superficially nowadays. So I was quite delighted actually to be introduced to this book. Yeah, I agree. Actually, the first part is actually very well paced and very well written. Yeah, I haven't actually reached the second part. Yeah, but I'm actually very interested also in the conflict between Japan and Korea, because from what I know, like Koreans, they were outcast by Japanese. Yeah, so I'm actually very interested to get into the second part. Yeah, but so far the first part, I'm really enjoying it.
Okay, so you intend to finish the book, right?
Oh, definitely.
Despite all the thing that we. Okay, fine. Thank you so much. Okay, can we go on? Yeah. No. What about you, Azita? Would you like to say something?
Sure.
Yes.
So to avoid repeating what Morag has already said, because I was all the time when Selen and Morag speaking, I was just nodding furiously because I agree with all they said. Yeah. Let me say that we have this small group on Telegram with Massey, Homa, and Shima. And Massey had started this book earlier, and she loved it. And then when I started it, I liked the beginning very much. And we both of us were telling Homa, you have to read this. And then I went on a little bit and I said, well, I'm not very sure that Homa should read this. And then I went a bit further and I was saying, Homa, no, don't read this. Please don't read this. Yeah. So, yes, I think if I had read it maybe when I was young.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was maybe a teenager or even before I had turned 25, I would have liked it very much. And if I hadn't read Cain and Abel by Jeffrey Archer before this, again, probably I would have appreciated it more. But that one is structured so much better. And it is some similar themes you can see in that. So there is no colonization there. But there is a strife there as well, and some similar obstacles in the way. And it's structured so much better that you can see the holes in the delivery here staring into your face. So yeah, what else? Reading this made me appreciate Hong Kong a million times more coming from the same background. And another thing is when I started reading it, so yeah, I like the book for all the tidbits that it taught me about Korea, its history, its culture. And like you, Roy, my first contact with this country was through tutoring Korean boys. And what else? And then when I started reading this book, I thought, all right, this is like a good indie movie. And then so it's like a good Hollywood series, right? And then it's like Days of Our Lives. I don't know whether you have watched that show, but at the end it was just like Days of Our Lives. And I put the speed of the audio become 1.5, and I was just hoping it would finish sooner. So yeah, that's it from me.
So that's a good thing about reading physical books. You can start just reading faster. So I suggested you did that with the audiobook as well. That's quite funny.
Yeah.
Up to a point, though, it becomes like chipmunks if you increase the speed too much.
True. And she has time for all these lurid sex scenes. Why didn't she just develop her characters a bit more? I feel even no sympathy for Shunju, who was the main character, that I felt for her at the beginning when she was growing up, a child bride at 15 and got married. And sorry, that was her mother. When she was in this Korean fishing village, she was a much more fleshed out Queen Sunju. But in the latter part of the book, I lost patience with her. I wanted to shake her, get a grip. I mean, that's how I felt.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yes, who would like to go next? Maybe Karamjit, whatever you've read, you want to say something?
I think she's not there.
Oh, she's not there. Okay, sorry. I haven't seen that. Okay, then Gi, Ling. Any one of you or both of you?
Oh yeah. I think I prefer the back of the book, what they call that, the later part of the book, rather than the first part of the book. And I can say that Sunja is a representative of typical traditional Asian, I suppose, in the sense. And then what else? And I don't really understand why would Noah commit suicide. This part I really don't really understand. Yeah. And then the part that really made me cry, I literally cry for like 10 minutes, is the last part where Sunja asking the priest husband that is Noah with you now in the heavens, something like that. That's really touching. But overall, I kind of have more understanding that why Korean people don't go eye to eye with Japanese. Because when I was studying in China abroad, like 99% of the foreign students in our school, in our university, are Korean at the time. They really don't like Japanese at all. And in fact, I have invited some of my Korean friends in Malaysia. I told them about this book. They were asking what am I reading. I said it's called Pachinko. It's a Korean history book. And they said, no, Pachinko is Japanese, it's not Korean. I said, no, I don't know the reason about it. And all of them, like literally 3 of them, they like, what do you call that? They're trying to avoid the conversation about the history of how Koreans suffer in Japan. And in fact, one of them mixed Japanese and Korean, but he stay in Korea. And currently he's in Malaysia. Yeah, they just don't want to. I invited them to join this meeting. They just don't want to come. Yeah, it seems like something traumatized to them. I don't know, but they're actually quite young. So I don't know. I think they still have the thing inside their heart, I suppose.
Mei Yin, could it be like maybe the new generation is not aware of what happened in the past?
I think they're aware.
Absolutely, no, they're totally aware.
I think they are aware. Yeah.
Yeah, I taught a lot of Korean kids in China, and I remember teaching them about we were doing theory of knowledge, and we were talking about one of the things that I teach quite interestingly is how it's very difficult for our countries to be objective about our own history. You know, how can we do that? It's one thing that we have to kind of think about. And then we kind of, and I'd always say to the kids like, you know, pick an event from your history, which we're going to kind of look at how it's represented. And the Korean children always Japanese occupation and comfort women. They never, ever picked anything else, ever. It was incredible. If you looked at kind of like, you know, any other nationality of kids, yeah, there'd be a few, there were a few themes that came up, you know, often it'd be World War II, or it would be this, or like, you know, American kids would pick a whole load of different stuff, you know, French kids would pick different stuff, the Korean kids picked the Japanese occupation and comfort women. Always. It was extraordinary, and again, kind of so it's totally in their consciousness. This history is very, very present. You know, because I was saying things like if you know, why do we learn the things that we learn in history? You know, it's interesting. Like if you sort of like if you went to school in the UK, you talked about this. You do the Nazis usually quite a lot, and you do the Tudors. And then we talked about what do people learn in different countries, and that was inevitably, it was almost like nobody could think of anything else that they'd ever learned in history in Korea apart from the Japanese occupation and comfort women, and that was kind of it. So, you know, clearly it still is a very scarring experience to this day, you know, so yeah, I find
it's very interesting in contrast with Malaysia and its history with Japan, because when my daughter went to the university here, they had this extracurricular club for forgotten the exact title. It was like admiring Japan and its culture, right? And yeah, so that there were a lot of Malaysian students as members of this club. And my daughter joined because she was interested in Japan, and because her best friend who was Malaysian and her boyfriend who was Malaysian, they both were members of this club. And they had these celebrations of Japanese festivities and the food and etc. etc. But then when I talk to the older generation, like Vic has always this thing about Japan never apologizing to Malaysia, or Cal telling us about all those atrocities that went on. And there's this gap, this generation gap about the way that Malaysians here see Japan.
Yeah, true. And also nowadays, Azita, nowadays means say about 10 to 20 years back, many people got interested in Korea actually. Many signed up for Korean language classes and courses. And I think one of the influences were the Korean serial and the dramas.
Right, but Malaysia doesn't have that animosity, that history with Korea, whereas it does have that with Japan.
Correct. That is true. So that's also very interesting.
Continuing from Azita's one, why the older generation of Malaysians resent the Japanese is because Japan came and colonized Malaysia.
Yes, of course.
But the other part, why the younger generation are more, is because of Mahathir's Look East
policy. Yes.
So because Mahathir adored the Japanese people, so I remember in school we were all going brainwashed for that Look East thing. So that's why you have that gap.
Thank you.
Thanks. Interesting. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yes, and also
Azhar.
because of proton.
Because of?
Because of proton.
Because of proton. Okay. Maybe Azhar, you want to go now?
No, I don't really have much to say except that whenever you guys talk about Pachinko, I always thought it was Japanese. And
because
I thought you guys, especially Roy, is going to talk about ocean. Because I know this book is about poverty. I mean, basically it starts out like quite depressing, ocean, and then it became like really literally days of our lives. Because, sorry, Roy, I can't hear you.
And woman of substance combined.
Yeah.
So
I have a question
I'm
for
intrigued by
Ling.
your stories, guys, because now I might have to read it, at least the synopsis.
Yeah, Ling just now mentioned that Sunja is a typical Asian traditional woman. Why do you say that, Ling?
Obedient, brainless,
Brainless? No.
I don't think so. I don't think she's brainless. She's a very smart kid. She's
Yeah,
very
Yes, I think so too.
enterprising.
And
I
so
think
my
because can I say something?
Yes.
I think because in this book, right, I see that women need to suffer. No matter how much they suffer, it will never be enough. So maybe
Oh
that's
dear.
the Asian part.
But notwithstanding, the women are the one that put the family together. They are the one who went out and got food for, and put food on the table.
Yes, that's why. But in the book, it keeps on saying that women need to suffer.
Yeah.
Was repeated many times.
Right.
They need to suffer. They
I
still
don't
gonna
think the book is proper. Like, I don't think the book is pushing that. I think, like, what's interesting about this book that is, like, especially if you're not familiar with Korean, Japanese, like the culture nuances, you know, like the whole shogunai and the whole, you know, suffering thing. It's like, you know, it's like filial piety itself, you know, it's like their culture that it's ingrained up until these days. So, but to say that the book is pushing for that, I would not agree. I think the book is being very critical of that whole mentality that from World War II up until this day, I feel it's something that is still embedded within them, maybe, or maybe the older generation.
Yeah, I agree with Aisha. I think when the mother was sort of dying, that scene when Sanja and Kianki was at her bed and she was just blurting out these hurtful, mean things. That was the scene when this saying was challenged, that women's lot is to suffer. Sanja challenged it, and I feel that was the position of the author itself, herself. Right.
I think for a woman during that time, for Sinja, she may not be radical in her actions because that isn't, you know, for her during that time wasn't expected, but she's rather, probably you could say, radical in her thinking, because she's questioning why do we have to suffer, why do we have to, you know, she had this whole like, or rather thinking about seed and blood, you know, why does it matter so much, you know, the whole conversation when Noah found out that his father is Hansu, you know, or he has Yakuza blood, you know, why does seed and blood matter so much? So yeah, Sunja is Sunja is an amazing character, but unfortunately Ming Jingli did not carry it, so, you know, she dropped her off midway and then pick her up again and drop her off midway.
I think Sunja is a very radical person because from the start when she got pregnant, she didn't want to marry Hansu.
Yes.
And for Asian culture, that is a taboo. You marry whoever gets you pregnant.
Well, she wanted to marry, but because he didn't want to marry her, that was why she broke her.
She didn't want to marry him because she didn't want to be the other wife.
Oh,
or
well,
the second one.
Right.
So that is pretty radical in itself. I mean, knowing that she's from a very poor family, she can just marry and get an easy life, but she chose not to, and that is, I don't think that's prideful. Sorry, Selen, but that's not prideful. That is a woman's power. She knew her strength and she valued herself. She didn't want to be the second wife, and I don't think she's prideful because when Noah wanted to go to college, she actually succumbed to the fact that Hansu had to pay for Noah's college. So of
she
course,
was practical
yeah,
then.
she didn't. She had some pride, but she didn't let that pride stop from doing what is right for her son.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, that's very interesting. But I think Karamjit said she has to go. So Karamjit, if you're there, do you want to say something before you go?
I think she left already.
She's left already. Yeah.
Oh,
Hi.
hi. Sorry.
Yeah, Karamjit. Yeah, just before you
Yes,
go, maybe something.
just a quick one because I have to collect a Korea medicine on the way. Yes, it was very informative in terms of from the historical part of Japan and Korea. And what amazed me was how the Japanese kind of looked down on upon the Koreans, and Koreans had to suffer so much just because of what was going on. And I think I can now sympathize with my mother, who is currently 85 years old. She has seen World War II, she has seen the Japanese occupation, and until today, she doesn't have anything nice to say about the Japanese. And I think the book kind of made me understand more about how the Japanese were in that era. Although the Japanese that we see today are so different, and they're so polite, and like it's like 360 degrees of what I've heard from my mother.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it was an eye-opener, and also to validate what my mother has been talking about.
Okay,
this is one of the few books that I've read, especially, you know, within the Asian community, because Korea is basically a neighbor of Japan, and they didn't even treat their neighbor well. I mean, it's just like Malaysia and Singapore. It kind of reminds me of that too. But Singapore was not so cruel compared to the Japanese. That's all I have to say. I'll just
Karanjit, I had in defense of Malaysia not treating Singapore well. We're not neighbors. We're basically family, you know.
Yeah, true.
So we're allowed to treat each other badly.
Anyway, yeah, thank you for that, Karanjit. She had to go. Guy, I'll come back to you later, because I know we heard Ling, but we haven't heard you yet. And then because of my screen, let me look at who I have. So Steph later, maybe we go with May first, then we go to Tick. Sis Karuna is also there. Oh yeah, May, you first.
Oh, yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm May, and welcome everyone to the first meetup of 2021. Am I right? Yes. Our first meetup?
Yes.
Oh,
correct.
yes.
Yes.
Because we have been meeting up for Don Quixote and others, so it doesn't
seem like.
Yeah, but anyway, I gave it a 4.5 rating on Goodreads. I usually will not rate books, and somehow I usually don't, except that few that really stood out in a certain way. I rated this a 4.5, and I think I understand where you all came from when you mentioned about that unbelievable part of Noah. And then I never really thought about it that way, because I was just reading and going along with the story. But I see it from how the author put it in, but just that it wasn't that fluid in that sense. I guess she felt that the historical element to put all these things in for us to be aware of it is more important than the characters itself. So you see the characters are not the main thing, but the historical elements are the main thing. So you get that sense from this book. It also reminded me of this Earth of Mankind, now that I've heard your thoughts on it, because when last year we did this Earth of Mankind, there were some parts in this Earth of Mankind where but it's more powerful in that sense, this Earth of Mankind, because it manages to mold the two things together, the character and the historical angle in a way. But in this book, it's more like I want to fit all this historical part in, but the characters, okay, let's see how to fit the rest of it in. But I still gave it a 4.5 because of the information or the education I get from that angle, the Korean and the Japanese. Sorry, Cal wanted to say something. Is it? Sorry.
I said I agree with you. The information was invaluable. But now the burning question on my mind is, can someone explain to me why the Japanese hated the Koreans so much when they could pass off as one another, as they did in the book? I don't understand. That is outside the book.
Guy, step in.
I don't understand that.
You mean you don't understand why the Japanese hate the Koreans?
So much, yet they still pass on to each other.
Look alike, they eat similar food, but why, even if you're born in Japan, according to this book, that you can't be accepted if you are born in in Japan. You can't be accepted as Japanese. Why not? They're
Oh,
always second class. Like Solomon, he had to get his ID card renewed every X number of years. Why?
okay. It's not a difficult question, but it's a very complex question, I would say. Uh, it's a bit like Chinese Malaysian. Actually, reading this book has a lot of similarities for Chinese Malaysian and some Indian Malaysian as well. Because Korea has two countries, so Koreans are most of them, the older generation who were in Japan, has a rising nationalist ideals because they have been conquered by Japan during the 1890s and early 1900s. So they were, it's like people are saying that, yeah, pada muka, like now the Koreans are back on controlling themselves and all these things. So some of them, they actually fight for dual identities. Most of them have this fantasy of returning to Korea. It's a bit like the Chinese Malaysian as well. Our grandparents' generation, they think about going back to China. So I was reading this book after reading Pachinko. It's called Jai Nichi. Jai Nichi means the people who are in Japan, the Korean part. So there was this commentary which is very balanced. The author himself is a Korean Japanese, and he talks about this. He said that actually a lot of the saying that the Japanese are evil and all these things, uh, you have to look at the evolution of the entire history, because some of these Korean who are living in Japan, some of them, they actually wanted to be integrated, but most of them do not want to. So that's why the Japanese government, when they are defeated by US, the atomic bombs, the US came in and signed a San Francisco Treaty with Japan, saying that they should grant the rights to whoever in their nation that they annex from the people. For example, Japan has conquered Taiwan for a long time, has conquered Korea for a long time, has conquered part of China, Dalian and all this for some time, conquered some of the Russian islands and all this for some time, and afterwards is Malaysia and Southeast Asia. So they actually do assemble a lot of this ethnicity in Japan. They export these people from all these places to work for them in Japan during the shortage of labor, especially before the World War II, because they have a lot of production capacity. And so the question is that at that time, US has a hand in this as well. US said that you should not give these people, should not force these people. So it created that kind of thing, And afterwards, US also has a hand in splitting Korea. So the treaty was enforced in a way saying that the Koreans in Japan has to choose. They have to choose whether they are the North Korean entity or they are the South Korean entity. And it was a very difficult choice. Some of them, they just want to become Japanese, and because of the treaty Japan signed with US, they have to grant the rights towards these people. So it created all these nationalities. So there are two types. It's called Jainichi Josen. The other one is Jainichi. I forgot. So one is the one is North Korea. The other one is South Korea.
Hangul.
Hangul, yes. So it was a messy situation, which is, I think, why Pachinko was written in a very neutral way is because the recent nationalism movement and all this integration movement, which is normal even in Malaysia, the Malay races is trying to assimilate the rest of us, even their own, like Minangkabau, all these people, through religion and all this. But in Japan, they are trying to assimilate through same language, same culture, and all these things. And people resist. It's inevitable. And then, but then they forgot that there are actually a long history behind. So the author also reviewed some of the Korean literature written in Japanese by Jainichi people that has this transition of tones. So in the very beginning, in the 1950s, the Korean Zainichi literature literally focused on integration. They actually wanted to be integrated. But afterwards, when Korean becomes stronger and stronger, especially South Korea, after the Emperor Hirohito died, which is the end of 70s, is truly the end of the post-war Japan era. So something modern began. And that time, the nationalism and the industry of Korea just go up. And people started to say that I wanted to retain the Korean passport or identity, you know. And so it became something that the Solomon and all these people needed to go back and renew, because the family, you know, the older generation chose something like that. And of course, some of them are imposed upon because of this thing. And the treaty is still, you know, still practiced in a way. So that is the identity side. For the other side is how the Japanese people treat Korean. Um, I would say Korean people are treated that way in a way is not very unlike the African Americans, because when Koreans are being imported to Japan for labor work, they are actually living in all these ghettos, and they are not they don't have well nutrition, they don't have good access to food and hygiene. So it created this kind of thing like the Koreans are filthy. And in Ikaino actually means a place of pig. Uh, because the Koreans, they literally have to live in a very small place, but they are feeding the pigs at the same time. So they all have the smell of the pig. A lot of the Koreans, you know, Ikaino and also those in Osaka. So there is this long history, like maybe 60 to 80 years of image of Korean as filthy and all these things that created. Not unlike like we think of African American as lazy, as they are like robbers or they are like thieves and all these things. Because of their living standard was so low, they have to fight. And for Koreans, they don't actually go and rob people, but they are still being looked upon as that stereotype. So that is the long answer to your very complex question. I try to squeeze everything into a shorter answer for you.
Thank you.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, please go on. Yes, Marek.
I was just saying thank you, Sagi. That was really interesting.
Yes.
I think I have another theory. I have another sort of, well, maybe not a theory. So I think the Japanese think that they are superior than other races in Asia. I think they are the Nazis.
The Asian Nazis.
Because I think they were the first Asian country that fought the Russians, who are Western, and won. And they've always thought that they are better than the Chinese. And the Koreans, I feel, are thought even less by the Chinese. Right?
I see.
So it's a bit like a Singaporean, Malaysian, and Indonesian.
Yes, correct.
Right?
You're right.
So the Singaporeans think they are better than us. And we think we are better than Indonesians.
Oh,
so it would naturally be that the Singaporeans would have Indonesians for breakfast.
Oh dear.
I'm not here to spread conspiracy theories, but there are cases where, like, my family members were saying, like, we should do something like the Singaporeans. We should just like give them some drugs and send them back to Indonesia. Which, like the Singaporeans. I'm like, hang on there. That's insane. You shouldn't, you know what I mean, right? That's like making them, it's like the opium war, but you're like injecting people. I mean, that's like insane. So I think that's the main reason that it started out that way. and then they pride themselves in being Europeans, I guess, of Asia, and that's why they started conquering the whole freaking places. And then of course the US decided that only we can do that.
I didn't read the book, but yet, but I think if we're discussing the pecking order, it always comes economic first, military second, then everything else. Everything else is basically just justification, right? So like how what you mentioned about the Chinese, the South Korean, the South Korean and the Vietnamese, because at one point it was part of Chinese dynasty. So naturally those are considered the what do you call it? The settled people, right? So and that stayed that way. Speaking of the interaction between Japanese and Korean, I do have a close friend who married a Japanese, and it took them 7 years to make both parties agree, the elders in the family, for exactly those reasons that Guy just mentioned about Koreans are dirty and things like that. But at the same time, Korea also did not come up until the 70s and 80s. So it will be a very different thing for us to envision. The Korea in the book, I've read the first part, second and third I haven't. It is very different from what we would be able to imagine now, right? So if we put that same context on maybe like the outer islands in Indonesia, outskirts, then probably we will be able to visualize it a little bit better.
Thanks, CB. Okay, so can we go on? Just let me check who's on. I think we have, Karuna, can we have you before we go to Tik, Aisha, and everybody else?
Yeah.
Hi, Karuna.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, but we can't see you.
Okay. Without the audio book, I don't think I would have finished about 100 pages.
Oh dear.
Yeah, because first of all, when I read a book, I need to be transported. Okay, I never felt this in this book. It was always like watching a diorama in a museum, you know. And another reason was sometimes I felt the author, some situations were very contrived. For example, the priest comes and stays in that the hostel. That looked very contrived to me. And then there was a premonition of the suicide. There was in the very beginning, the priest stays in Sanja's hostel, right? So that looked very contrived to me. Anyway, the reasons given was not good enough, you know. So it looked like the authors forcing a particular outcome. Okay.
It was suggested by the brother who had gone there earlier, right?
That didn't look believable to me.
Okay. All right.
Okay. And then another one was the premonition of the suicide. So you guys remember that there was a case which
yes, the boy.
Okay. When the author does it, a lot of people say it's a good literary device. For me, it makes the author very visible. It's like, say, a movie director jumping into the scene of a movie. So I don't like that. So this makes this sort of breaks the spell, you know. So for me, author invisibility is very important. So yeah, other than the Korean situation in Japan, I didn't learn anything else. The suffering that women go through, we have read it so many times in so many books. Okay, and what else? I can justify the suicide because after the need for survival, after the need for reproduction, one of the strongest force, and it's very invisible, is to belong to a group or to a community. Okay, this is that's what forced him to, once he knew that he's going to lose the status of belonging to the Japanese community, he committed suicide. I can totally understand that.
Actually,
Yeah,
the author did mention in one of the articles, it's actually Noah is a symbolic of a person who wanted to belong, you know. So he was very desperate. That's why he did, and you know, like he would do anything that possibly could within legal channels. So, yeah.
You see, it's not the suicide per se, it's what brought him to that point, as Morag said. As an empathetic person, the journey of Noah's growth, when you see him from his childhood to his adulthood, you would expect an understanding person like that to behave and react differently upon understanding that this man is his father and that his mother had had such a relationship outside marriage before meeting his stepfather, right? So that first reaction of running away and deciding to live as a Japanese, that reaction is something that is questionable and out of character. He has grown to trust and like Hansu before that. He has had those monthly lunches. Before he understands that he is somebody who's probably had his wealth by belonging to this Yakuza gang, or understanding that this is his biological father, he has grown to like him as a person. Now, suddenly, just because his eyes is open that, okay, I have this relationship, this blood relationship with this man, he cannot stand looking at him even. And he cannot stand meeting his own mother. Whereas before, he had been very protective towards his mother. And he had this, oh, well, don't let me go on and on. So yeah, it doesn't make sense. You can justify his suicide by saying that he doesn't want to be outed as a Korean. But what has brought him to that point? It doesn't make sense. It's not congruent with his character.
And sorry,
Yeah,
Karuna.
sure.
Yes. To kind of, Karuna was saying earlier about how contrived the writer is and in placing her clues, right? I would say, honestly, the whole Noah episode, I would, it could have been a very great journey, a very powerful moment, and it is still, I guess, one of the most powerful moments in the book. But I think she failed there as a writer to have, it could have like really brought her work on another level, because I believe if, and she has already alluded the fact that Noah wanted to be Japanese, because even when he was a kid, I think this was even before Mosazu was born, that he wanted to be Japanese. Like there she wrote there, because I remember that, because I thought it was kind of out of character a bit. Yeah, it was like the episode, because immediately after Noah was born, Isaac got jailed, and then he died, and then after that you immediately jumped into Noah going to school already, right? Yeah, there was a bit where we get in, where Noah, we were seeing things from Noah's point of view, and even as a child, he has alluded that he wanted to be Japanese. It's a secret that he carried with him. Yes, that was the line. It was a secret that he carried with him. But as what Karuna said, like I would totally blame it on the writing. I actually understood why he taken his life, and but yeah, it's just the clunky writing. I don't yeah, that's about it.
I thought it was a huge missed opportunity, actually, Noah, you know, to actually kind of really deal with this sort of dilemma of this boy who is in this kind of immigrant situation of being born in Japan. He doesn't know anything else other than Japan. He can't speak very good Korean. He speaks Japanese. And yet he's living in this Korean family, and he is, to all intents and purposes, a second-class citizen in this country that is his home. So I think there's a huge dilemma there to kind of be explored. And in a way, what the other brother does is he kind of, once he stopped fighting, he kind of fits into that role of what Koreans do in Japan. You know, they become Pachinko owners, and they kind of find their place, and they can be kind of quite successful at it, but that's their place in that society. And he kind of fits in there and actually does quite well. And so he doesn't seem troubled by this duality. He puts himself into that role of the Korean, you know, by nationality, but in Japan kind of community. So I just thought that there was a great kind of dichotomy there to explore. And because Noah wants to be educated and he wants to kind of find entry into this elite society, which is you have to be Japanese for, you know, there is something to explore there, and she just missed it. And I thought, and even the suicide, you know, there is this role of suicide in kind of Japanese, you know, society. About shame. And, you know, if you look back to the kind of samurai, you know, people committed suicide. It was a totally okay thing to do, you know, it was an honorable thing to do. And again, at the end of the war, you know, when
kamikaze.
So many kind of Japanese, you know, soldiers, you know, committed seppuku, they committed suicide because of the shame, you know. So there's this, again, this kind of great dilemma of Noah, who's been raised as a Christian with this idea that suicide is a mortal sin and you're going straight to hell if you kill yourself. But in a society where suicide is part of the history, I don't know what the situation is nowadays, but there's a historical precedent in Japan for suicide as an honorable death, which it really isn't if you're a Christian ever at all. So there was just kind of so much there that could have been really interesting that just kind of got skimmed over, I thought. You know, you almost needed another book just about those two brothers, and then to really explore a lot more detail the separate journeys that they find with it, because I suppose the story is the one who kind of integrates into his place is successful, and the one who tries to do something else is not in the end. So you know, and then this third generation, Solomon and everybody, do they find a way through this? But it just was kind of too quick. I thought it needed to be twice as long, but it wasn't written well enough for me to want to read on pages. Really.
Was his brother called Moses?
Yes, Mosasu. Mosasu.
Regarding the suicide and its place, though, there was this other character, Hirokaki.
Yeah.
His father also committed suicide, I think, and then that was a sort of trouble for the family, and there was this painting of their family, I suppose, something I don't remember exactly.
I thought Haruki's father
The
left
shame,
brother.
the doctor,
Yeah, there's all these other sort of things like his friend who's the policeman.
Yes, exactly. Right. Right.
Well,
it's Rika's father. It's Rika's father that committed suicide, the doctor.
Oh, yeah. He committed.
Because I remember there was a suicide that brought some trouble for the family of the person who committed suicide. Is that it, or did I listen to?
It was out of shame, I think, because there was some malpractice or some patients died and things like that, right? So that's why the family.
I was wondering whether Noah's suicide would cause some problem like that, some social tainting for his family.
Yeah,
it would be questionable because it was so sudden, and there would be some questions, some sort of ostracization for the family, maybe. But yeah, totally agree with Morak that it was a missed opportunity. And also with the generations, just gliding over them, and then you would not relate to them as much as you would want to. I was comparing it to Homegoing by Yajet, and that has done so well. And then the two lines that are parallel, which makes it so much more difficult. Here she is having it in one line, and then there are so no, delivery is not.
Could it be that she is very ambitious in exploring a lot of different
Yes,
themes?
she doesn't know the limitations of her power. And what you said, May, is exactly, it hits the mark with me. She apparently what matters to her is the
history lesson,
treasure of the history. And it's not organic. What she is giving us is not an organic historical novel. The fiction part is lacking. Compare it with that beautiful Hilary Mantel's work, right? There you have history and you have fiction, and they click. Here it doesn't.
Azita, can you say it again? Whose book you said?
Hilary Mantel, Wolf Hall. Wolf Hall.
Wolf Hall.
Okay, and just to add, and you have a lot of characters. Most of them are called Thomas to some degree or other. And you know, you actually feel she has this huge cast of characters in there. And I felt I knew them all by the end of it. You know, I knew Cromwell, but I also knew Anne Boleyn, and I knew the Duke of Norfolk, and I knew Wolsey, and I knew all these people. So although she's got all these characters, I feel I know them. And I just didn't in this book. I felt that we'd kind of skimmed over them. It was like I'd met them for half an hour and then they walked out of my life again, and I never saw them anymore. Yeah. I felt actually, a passing acquaintance with them. Yeah.
And I sort of felt that it is my karma, because we were discussing this book by Borges, Ficciones. There was a short story, and I was saying that I wish it was a novel. And this week it was a short story blown into a novel, and oh my God, I thought, why did I say that? This is my punishment.
Asita, yes. Actually the one that the Iranian writer, the one that I asked you about, Summer in Shiraz, who wrote that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she puts in the historical aspect quite well too, without bogging down.
See, don't let me see, don't get me started on that.
Oh dear.
There are so many errors, so many mistakes there. Don't trust her judgment, please.
Okay, maybe we can maybe we can go to, and before we go to Steph, she did say, I think in the book, the writer did say that she's looking at realistic fiction. So that was quite interesting for me, but we discussed that later. So Steph, can we go to you, and then maybe we go to Sis, Tik, and Aisha, and then we come back. And if you want to, please include, if you'd like to, please include the character maybe you most liked or most didn't like, or easily forgettable or unforgettable or whatever, if you want to. I mean, yeah.
Everything I felt you guys have mentioned, especially the Japanese racism towards Korean, that was an eye-opener. The writer's writing style was terrible, because comparing it to Homegoing was very much easier to understand, and the time frame also makes sense. But this one is like especially towards the last part, it was like a like a coleslaw thing. She's just dumping in characters, and the park with the gay people and the policeman and Hannah and all that. What the hell is all that for?
Yeah.
And it does not connect back to the main characters and the generation story that's going to flow. And it was a very disappointing read. So from 4-star, I actually put it to 3-star, because I mentioned that I had a hangover for this this thing because the book was just too bloody long. It should be cut in half. They should just the last part shouldn't be there. I mean, if she just cut it into half and stop at a certain point, it would make more sense. But trying to get through the book, it was such a torture actually. So but the characters that I really like the relationship between Sunja and Kungi. That even though they are sister-in-laws, I could really relate to that kind of relationship. That's the only part I like actually. Yeah.
Okay. So you like them as well, these two ladies?
Yeah, because in Tamil, I mean the Indian society, especially in Tamil serial, sister-in-laws don't get along at all. But these two are like angels together. So it's like an eye-opener for me.
Yeah, I think it's also, but do you know something? Remember when I told you earlier, I knew people like that in real life? You actually come across some, and maybe it's because of the culture or the household or the family, I don't know. Because one of my favorite places in India is Sikkim. And there I have seen the society functioning like this. So similar. And the sister-in-laws, and I actually know somebody who is like Sunja and like me. So I was like, oh my God, I just kept on thinking of these two women, you know? Okay, anyway, thank you. So can we go to you maybe?
Sorry, I want to share what Karuna shared with us.
Yes, please. Yeah, I was thinking of that to come to that later, but please,
No,
yeah.
we were discussing, and then Roy was mentioning something, and then she mentioned the author as she. So Karuna got so surprised. It's a she? I thought it was a he, the way that she's writing about all the sex scenes and all that.
And the F words.
And the F word. Then I said, oh, okay. Then I asked him, what do you think about 50 Shades of Grey? Then he said, oh, in that book, there's no the F word.
That was interesting because I didn't know that. Okay.
But you know what? I felt that the sex scenes were also not organic. I felt that they are there just to increase the sales. If you just take away the sex scenes, first of all, the story wouldn't suffer. And secondly, it would become a YA book for 15 years old, for 14 years old. Seriously, imagine. Everything is explained for you. You are given everything. You are told what to think about all the characters. There is no gray. It's all black and white. That's YA book.
Oh, thanks. Okay, maybe we go to Sis first now, Sis, and then Tik and Aisha, and then we can, talk about other things as well. Yeah.
All right. Actually, I was in a reading slump, right? I couldn't read, But the moment I picked up Pachinko, I couldn't put it down. It was very interesting because this is my second Korean literature. My first was Kim Ji-young, born 1980. That was my first. This is my second. Well, I did mention about, the author keep repeating that women need to suffer. So I don't like that part actually. And then about Noah, well, I already said also that it's actually a symbolic that everybody want to, belong to a group, want to just belong. And about the F word, it doesn't fit, It's like you're reading in something very beautiful, very literature-like, and suddenly there's an F word. I was like, okay. So my mood changed a bit. But interestingly, Sunja didn't use the F word. She used love making. So I was wondering why Min Jin Lee, used that word for Sunja, but the rest is the F word. So overall, this book actually, I'm not really good in history. So after reading this book, I'm going to read more Korean lit and, read more about Korean War and Zainichi, Ikaino, all these things. Yeah, thank you for whoever suggested the book.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, my dear. Tik, would you like to go next? Yeah, she's there. Hi.
Hi, yeah. Okay, yeah, I was it's a mixed feelings on this book. I agree with when you guys say that it started off beautifully in the sense that it started off promising, and then when it gets to the part where he became a billionaire and everything, yeah, I thought that was a bit too much. But anyway, I think that if the writer's intention is to bring in the idea of displacement, I think she did it well, because I think it was dealt, even though perhaps not in depth, but it was dealt from many aspects, not only with the Koreans being in Japan, but also the Japanese themselves. I mean, yeah, I know there's a lot of characters that we have to process. I can agree with you. I was like, even when we get to Phoebe, I was like, oh, is this even a necessity to, to bring in her character? But Phoebe, I think, represents that Korea migrating, the second generation migrating to a country which colonized them, but not in the way that the Japanese colonized the Koreans. So how Phoebe's life turned out a little different from how Solomon's life was. Noah, to me, he's evil in the sense that I think what he did is just to punish the mom and Hansu. It's perhaps he was going through a lot of conflict with himself, but to me, it looks more like a punishment. Yeah, when he took off, not really accepting the mom's explanation, I thought that was a bit too much as well, because he, I don't know. I mean, he came about as somebody who tend to understand a lot about what was going on with the family, But then when he found out that Hansu was the father, and the way that he just cut off the ties with everybody, that was the first punishment. And I think when he killed himself, that was to me, that was his ultimate revenge to make his parents suffer. Yeah. I like Mozaru, not like in the sense, but I think his character is interesting, the brother, because he did what Noah said that he, remember when he gave the advice to the friend who was bullied? I can't really remember exactly what he said, but he followed Noah's advice and he survived. This is one character that survived in a way. He came out successful at the end. So what was it? It got me wonder about what was it about him, and to bring that those two characters are put it in a juxtaposition. How are they actually? What is it about Noah that is lacking, or what is it about Mozaru that he had that edge as compared to Noah that made him survive? So yeah, that was what went through my mind as I was reading it. And regarding the sex in the what disturbs me about how she about the sex in the scenes was the fact that I think she mentioned at one point that Hansu likes it, that what's her name, Sunja, was innocent and naive, and I think when the writer puts it that way, it's almost like there's a bit of pedophilic thing going on there. I don't know. I just don't feel comfortable with it. It's like to me, it's like how she expect how people should be, or how women should present themselves to men or something like that. Yeah, that's all.
Thanks so much, Tick. In fact, one of the scenes that disturbed me a lot was when Hansu, remember that niece girl that came and she's supposed to, uncle, do this for me, whatever. Yeah. The way he kind of punched her, I was shocked. And it was like, oh goodness, imagine. And then the worst part is, I didn't know this about where the women could go go to the place where they would bathe men and you know, live the rest of the. Oh my God, I was like, should I read on or not? But anyway, yeah. So yeah, thanks
Oh,
a lot.
sorry. The reason that you got shocked when he punched that young woman, do you think that was because it
He's a
wasn't?
father.
No, do you think it was because it was quite different from what you were given about Hansu up to that point? Because
Okay, yeah, could be, or maybe because, yeah, also because he's a father of, you know, girls who are older than this particular girl, and yeah, maybe the whole idea of Hansu still had something redeeming about him, maybe, but yeah, could be, yeah. After that, it was like all the way down for me where Hansu was concerned, but like but he was also frustrated. It
Right.
happened when during the funeral, right? He was supposed to go to the funeral or something like that. Okay, so but still you cannot justify his
Because
actions.
when you said just now to think about your favorite character throughout the book, for me, my favorite character was Hansu.
Oh, okay, interesting.
And,
He was real to you?
right.
That's why? Oh, okay.
And at that point, when that punching happened, the person that that became not my favorite anymore, or rather, I should say, I lost all redemption hope, was not Hansu, but the author, because
Oh, okay.
because it was all the clues that was given about
Okay.
Hansu's character was something that he would be, well, if not kind towards women, at least not violent, physically violent.
Yes.
And that was not by it.
But you again, you know, going back to how contrived she is, this was kind of alluded way back in part one, even though he didn't beat up those kids. But you know, those remember those three
Yeah, the
kids?
two boys, the three boys, yeah.
Yeah, and like he didn't beat them up, but how vulgar he got with them, you know, his
No, so that is the thing. They were boys.
They were boys, yeah.
Because I don't know whether I think it is the same in Korea. From what I got from my Korean friends, I felt that that is the same culture in Korea as we have in Iran. There is a huge distinction between beating men and boys and beating girls and women. It's a point of honor for men never to beat women and girls as far as possible. So unless it is their wives, because Islam, right? You know.
But that reinforces your point that it goes it boils down to the author. She is like his rage is there, Hansu. There's that rage, and maybe he could have just insulted that uh, uh sex worker, or maybe, you know, but not beat her up until she's half dead, you know.
Yes, exactly. I can accept one slap.
Yes, exactly.
But he is the sort of person that regains his control. That's his source of power. If it was somebody who would just lose it, he wouldn't get to that point. He wouldn't get to that power. And no, that's not who he is.
Can I add something to this? Because Hansu is part of the, if I pronounce it correctly, is it the Yakuza? And, you know, we grew up watching a lot of Hong Kong or Japanese movies with Yakuza. And the thing about them is that violence is always there. So it's if you watch the movies, even though it's make-believe, but somehow there is so much of violence, anything with the Yakuza. So I guess when I got to that scene and I knew that Hanzu is Yakuza, it didn't strike me as off because of what I knew, what I knew or what I watched in movies before. I think when he was dealing with the family, there is where his concern and his care comes about, and he goes out of his way for all this. But when it's just anyone else, that is when the Yakuza angle comes in. I look at it from that way.
There was one point where the author did say that Hansu didn't like children, when he was young, but then later on he liked children. So that's another shift of character also you can see.
Well, that is, I think, normal. We grow up and our attitude.
Your parent, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes we like our own children, but we don't like other children. But for me, for the Yakuza angle, in the same scene, the driver thinks about a worker or somebody who he had mangled his finger, right? He had cut off his finger. That is totally believable. He is a Yakuza boss, he would do that. But this girl punching him, still no.
Yeah, true.
Who is Sunja? Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Who is who?
Sunja.
Who is Sunja? Is the main character, one of the main characters.
The one on the cover.
Can I just say something here?
In relation to Hansu.
Yeah, you read the book. You read the novel. Yeah, we are not going to tell you.
Read the Wikipedia.
No, at the who married who?
No,
Sunja did not marry Hansu.
Okay.
But they had a child.
Who is Noah's child?
Yeah. Who is Noah's mom and dad? Yeah.
Are they?
They are Noah's parents.
Sanju is Noah's mother, and Hansu is his father.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
That's all I need to know.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Because when you said about like pedophilia, I didn't understand that part because I thought that Sunja was a prostitute or something and was very young.
Oh, okay. All right. Now, Aisha, do you have anything you would like to share before we get to Steph's question? Oh, Guy first. Okay, Ken? Guy first, and then we get to Steph's question about Joseph or Joseph. What about him? What we think of him? Yeah, Guy, can we go to you first?
Nothing much to add because I think it's very it's a very East Asian culture, which after seeing you all talking about all the impossible points, I found that it's very hard to explain. It's really very different. And I mean the Noah Susai and all these like the Hansu beating up the girl. Okay, so what's going on in this is that let's talk about suicide part you all discussed quite a bit. That part I can give some idea. You know, after World War II and the nation building, in the past, Korean is using Chinese characters. Vietnamese is using Chinese characters as well. But during the nation building, they all, like Korean, they still mix. They have their own Hangul, which is created by an emperor, but it's not exactly in wide usage. I mean, there are words that has the same pronunciation, but it's written for different characters. So they go all out. They just want to reject the Chinese characters. They want to build their own nation. So this is how pushed they are to form
their own nation
and identity and culture. They wanted to say to the world that their culture is theirs.
They say the Mooncake Festival is originally from Korea.
Yes, there are a lot of these things that's going on during a nation's building. I understand that, like for Malaysians,
Nasi lemak.
Nasi lemak and all this. But then we are guided by the Malay aristocrats to build an image of Malay aristocrat image of Malaysia, which is not the Malay. Even the Malay villagers, they have different way of thinking about this. Not the middle class and the farmers and all. So for Koreans and in Japanese and Vietnamese, they all gone through the phase. So for Noah, it's a very, very difficult situation for him because Korean actually are more, what to say, they are more 团结, united. They are more united as a people, because somehow it's in their culture comparatively to Japanese. So Japanese are not so tight between each other. Chinese is the worst, of course, among these three, So the Korean people, they judge you. The judgment, even for Chinese, we are comparatively not so united as Korean and Japanese. We already got a lot of judgment from parents, grandparents. They judge you according to your values, like how much you adhere your values to your community, to your ethics, to the way you live. Now, of course, the communist revolution in China is a good thing for Chinese, because it sort of eliminates a lot of those things. But it's still very, very prevalent in Malaysian Chinese.
In Penang is the
Penang,
worst.
in Taiwan, Taiwan is still very prevalent. So this judgment thing is very, very strong, especially if you are Korean in Japan, and suddenly Korea is coming up and Koreans are going to embrace the culture as their own, and you're a person who wants to live as a Japanese, you get judged. So that's a suicide part. There's a lot of friction there. And as for the Hansu part, is actually, I think Hansu is just basically also a very, very complex character. It's very East Asian. So from what I heard, it's very, very difficult to explain. I mean, different, you can see that the culture is very, very different. But I think homegoing is not realistic, because homegoing is fitting all the stereotypes. And yes, the story flow, but I just don't think they're real. But for the characters in Pachinko, I can relate to these people because I saw a lot of these people in my life, in my friends, and in my university as well. I have quite a few Korean juniors and friends, and we talk a lot on all these things. But homegoing is very stereotype. I don't. I mean, I like the book as a fiction. It's a novel, but for Pachinko, it feels more like an account. So it's putting out the account. The one thing that I think the author is lacking is that she really put too many parts of the society in the same book, which is very confusing for people who are not from this culture or from the East Asian culture brought up to understand it thoroughly. And to unpack all this at different level is just painstaking. But I think for someone who has an East Asian culture, maybe they will appreciate it more. So perhaps all the suggestion, I think she really needs to write many different books focusing on just a couple of themes. If not, it's really hard. That's what I felt. But for me to read this as a book, it was really like, it's like a bomb drop onto my mind, because I read it slowly through the entire book. Sunja is like unbelievable. This character is like it's an in-between who challenges the tradition, but at the same time unable to own up to the tradition as well. She failed halfway. She unable to do that for her children, although she loves her children. So there's a lot of heartbreaking moment for me, seeing Sunja, because there are a lot of mothers like that who are really brave, that people who are actually silenced. So I really love this book. I think this book is way, way, way heavier and much more meaty packed than Homegoing, which Homegoing is just perpetuating something that we already know. But Minji is able to do that in a slight, comparatively, this should be like 3 books. So that's what I felt. So that's my point of view. So sorry, Aisha.
Yeah.
No, don't apologize. It's your turn.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I
no.
would.
Yes,
But I would
Aisha.
like to reply to Guy first. Wait.
Okay.
Let me. Oh no, never mind. I can do that. Okay. No. Guy, because you say that, is it possible though? Like I understand your, like, again, I understand how Noah's suicide came about. At the end of the day, I would say it's her writing that is, it's just very frustrating. And but and your points are valid, but could it be that because you are highly familiar with East Asian culture, therefore you feel more empathetic to this whole book, you know? And in some sense, you know, like for me, okay, some of you have said if you were to read this, okay, like anyway, for me, for example, I may not be East Asian, obviously, and I will never be East Asian, but growing up enough like within this region, absorbing the you know, from whatever we read from television and the internet, and you know, with the Japanese phenomena that happened a few years back, and then now is the K wave and whatnot. So you know, you pick up all these histories and these nuances. So I a lot like what you guys said about the information that this book shares, the histories and then the layers and the cultural nuances, you know, I truly appreciate whatever that she's trying to do, but she's packing it a bit too much in the book, and this is why I feel very frustrated, because if I were to read it, like some of you have said, if I were to read it before I was exposed to all of this, you know, when I was young and green or whatever, then I would really be blown away, because wow, all of this is happening. I didn't know. This is like, no, this is a mainstream history, so to speak, or whatever. And we have such a different perspective of like the Japanese people that, you know, we are properly we know about. But then because of the familiarity to, you know, my limited familiarity with this, with them, I feel frustrated because okay, I know somewhat all of this. What else is new? Or rather, why can't you write? Oh no, what else is new sounds bad. Or rather, why can't you write it more beautifully that does this whole thing justice? You know, she talks on like I the themes of Sunja and the struggles of womanhood like throughout the whole war, and you know, because she only briefly touched about, oh, I'm stuck. Hello? Yeah, she only briefly talked about, I'm back. Okay. She only briefly talked about comfort woman, and not even using that term, and it was just insinuating it. So when, you know, it's such a big part of the history, so it was like, oh, you missed that. And then, you know, when they moved to Ikaino, and then there was a whole Dainichi issue and whatnot, and you know, there's so many she's do much, and I think that's where the frustration with as a literary piece, because at the end of the day, if you don't have that Wikipedia pages, is what I feel.
Yes, the problem is with writing. It's not with the complexity of the culture. If we have read books from Africa, from South America, from Black writers, from, I don't know, from all over the world, and they have succeeded in making us feel, really feel and understand the troubles of their people. We can expect our own continent, the authors of our own continent, to do the same. And if Hong Kong has succeeded in that, why not her compatriot? So, okay, so she is half Japanese, but anyway. So yeah, I think it is our right as readers to have the same standard, hold her to the same standards. It is your job as an author to help me as a reader to feel. So my usual vent, say less, show more. And she's all through these 500 something pages. She's telling. He is suffering, she is suffering. Okay, yeah, I get it. It's repetition after repetition, but make me feel, and she doesn't make me feel. And some of it, okay, so some of it comes across, but not all of it.
And also before I forget, this is not a translation, by the way. I just double checked because I got confused. So yeah, so this is an English piece of work, but yeah, I mean, I try to not get the writing bother me so much, but up to I can specifically point the moment where I got really impatient. It was when the story shifts to starting to introduce Mozasu. You know, he as a boy who doesn't want to go to school, or so he's the complete opposite of his brother, and then you kind of can see where he goes, how he's gonna go. I'm like, oh, this is so contrived, and it got me really yeah, frustrated. And what else? But what else do you want to say about this? But I have to say, what I learned is that I did not know the whole pachinko industry. I always thought that it's very, very Japanese. I did not know that there's a hint of Korean history in it, and that is very interesting. But again,
yeah, that's the thing. Every good thing that we say about it, that we learned this. We learned that all the information. It's just like we have read a very interesting essay, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. We learned that, but then by the end of the book, as I finished it, a few minutes before
the emotional part is lacking.
Yeah, and no, and I was like, also, is this why the title is Pachinko? I mean, the way she tries to pull everything back into the pachinko business is again, and yeah, just because Karuna used this word, and I'm like, yeah, that's a good word. It's contrived.
Yeah, and also anybody, why Pachinko as the name of the book? Anybody wants to say anything about that?
Gambling, I guess. The gambling.
Yeah.
The
It is between,
But it's explained, Roy. It's explained in the book.
Yeah, I know it says that, but also because I was wondering, okay, the pinball, I was trying to go back to how the pinball system works, and there are more in the story integration to show that. Could be much more.
There's also a thing, where there's a line sticks with me where it says quite early on where Moses kind of gone. It talks about him, and they're fiddling.
Yes.
There have to be some winners, but there always have to be more losers. So if you're playing Pachinko, the odds are stacked against you. You are more likely to lose. So that's kind of what I thought, is like they're in this system, both of them, which is rigged against them. There are going to be a few winners, but there will always be some more losers. I think that's just right. And I know we keep going on about Wolf Hall because I've put it in the chat when we were reading it, and I think that's the thing for me that was interesting. I was interested because again, I didn't know the history very well. If I'd known the history, I would have been bored with it, because I didn't. And that again is where I compare it with something like the Mantel, because I know that history backwards, but I really wanted to read the book because the character,
exactly.
The writing is fantastic, and it's a retelling of some very familiar history, but in a way that's really engaging. Whereas this bit, I was like, oh well, I didn't know that happened in Japan and Korea at that time.
Exactly.
But that was what was interesting me, not really the characters so much.
It's more like the history is the redeeming factor for me. I was like, okay, so there's some use in this book. You get what I mean?
Yeah. And the closer it got to the modern times, because we already knew that part, it was
I think as well, this kind of time, so although it's really split into 3 chunks, the first chunk is like 1910 to 1933, it says, so it covers 20 years, but actually it doesn't really. Most of it covers like 32, 33. It covers like quite a small period in time, Sunya and the relationship, and her getting pregnant and Isak coming, and so there's a lot of time spent in 1932 and 1933. And then later we just start jumping and missing years and kind of, it's 1968 and now it's 1975. So that for me is also the thing that's disjointed. We start off, and I think that's maybe why we all like the first bit better, with this quite detailed sort of involvement with these characters at this very particular point, and then it just kind of starts to jump around.
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot of big time jumps, and some of it feels like you know, okay, since Stephanie posed a question about Joseph, isn't he supposed to die straight away? Or something like that. Joseph.
Oh, Joseph. No. He had to suffer. Not only the women, but the men.
Like the whole, oh, I'm gonna die soon. You should marry my wife, yada yada. And then he's like 7 years later, still alive. You know?
Actually, I was trying to also see the connection between the names and the characters in the Bible. Of course, I didn't get very successful, but still, you know, like Noah, then Joseph, then you have Solomon, okay, the wise one.
Right? And Noah, who's
yes,
lives so long.
Exactly. Noah is the one ends up with the ark, and this is like, okay, why? And interesting. And also another thing is, I think one of you mentioned what was the need for people like Hannah, is it? Whoever to have come in. I thought the Phoebe thing was quite interesting actually, because I thought it reflected a little bit of the writer as well, because being in the States and then coming back and seeing. I thought that was very real, because, and I liked the way it didn't have a Bollywood ending where they would marry and the families would be happy. I like the way she said, okay, I'm packing my bags, I'm going. I kind of thought, okay,
I like that scene. I like that suitcase scene very much. What Stephanie pointed out earlier about I almost forgot about Haruki Totoyama and Ayami, you know, the whole gay policeman. And like, I understand you want to show the cultural nuances of, you know, those times in Japanese, and you kind of want to bring it back all to balance again, you know, not to be so critical of Japanese and see what they suffer as well. Dude, write another book. Seriously.
So they actually have a park where they go and make out.
And I've seen pictures of those kind of parks. So that's another bit that I'm like, yeah, I know this happened. Nice. But I can look up Wikipedia for this, you know, or Tumblr. That's where I saw those pictures.
When you're talking about the suicide, right? Is it in Japan? I don't remember. Gi, is it in Japan where they have a forest where they can go to because they want to die? There is Japan, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I was just thinking of that. Yeah.
But yeah, like, you know, there's also a scene where, okay, Hansu suddenly appeared out of, like, you know, conveniently he appeared at the restaurant saying, you guys need to leave. Yeah, you need to leave Osaka straight away because of the bombing and whatnot, right? And then during that part 2 episode, the book 2 episode, the dealings of between Sunja and Hansu seems to be Hansu has no longer feelings for Sunja. It's just about his progeny, his kids. That's what that's all what he cares about, right? So, but then suddenly in book 3, when Hansu appears again, suddenly he's desiring Sunja again, you know? So it's like suddenly Hansu came, Hansu saw Sunja, Hansu got an erection, and suddenly Hansu has prostate cancer.
Yeah, no, okay. Can somebody explain to me at the end, maybe, because I don't understand a few things about, remember the old lady's property being sold off, and then why Moses was thrown off?
Basically, Kazu
used him lah. Basically, it's just, so that means it's a bad. Yeah, correct. I was thinking, so discrimination lah, in a way, because you're Korean and you're
politics lah, that's all.
Yeah,
it's just politics.
It's like basically the advice that Kazu gave Solomon is exactly what he's doing. In business world, play brutal.
Yeah.
Watch your own back. So do we want to translate that as a racial thing or is it a capitalist thing? I don't know.
Yeah, but it's really sad because you have a good worker and, you know, again, it's like finally it's your gain what you do. That's why it was interesting when they played the game and he pretended to lose. I was trying to understand a bit of all of that, you know. I said, no, I don't want to bother. I want to get to the end. But I liked the way the novel ended. What about you guys?
I like that it ended. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm happy it ended.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Roy.
Yes.
I like the because the thing novel ended.
Yeah, that's what Aisha was saying. She liked the fact that it ended. No, but anyway, I was thinking, wow, interesting. Also, it had to be a graveyard, and it was Sunja, and you know, it was like somebody else who, and but again, it was the talk of Noah as well, and the fact that she was talking to Isaac, you know. Well, I thought that was nice, and May, you were telling us something earlier about the quiet part. Can you tell them again? Yeah, I liked what you said. You know.
Thanks for letting me have the opportunity to say that again. I find that the whole novel, it has a quiet strength to it. Maybe in a sense because I see the women and I see stoicism in them to soldier on. And maybe in that sense for us as reader, we had to soldier on for this book. But I find that throughout it is a really quiet book. There is no, of course, there is the violence and all that, but there is quiet energy throughout the book. That quietness in the book. That was what I got. And just now when y'all were talking about the scenes and all that, one scene suddenly came to my mind and I want to share that. It's about food, you know, when Noah was in Tokyo as a student and he couldn't, you know, go for lavish dishes. And whenever he meet Hanzu, is that once a month, and Hanzu would bring him to this sushi place where, you know, it's like a omakase kind of thing, you know, nice bits of sushi and all that. And the thing that was going on in Noah's mind was so interesting. He's like, you know, we like to eat our meal quick and all that, and he doesn't experience at all. And I thought that part was like so memorable in a way, you know, you thought you're treating, Hanzu thought he's treating his son to such a lavish and lovely meal, and his son couldn't wait to go back and enjoy his Korean ramen or something. Yeah. So that scene was like so memorable when you're talking about scenes and all that. I thought that was beautifully done.
And even and some of the things I also liked was about, you know, the food cart and the women. But what about this guy? What's his name? Chang-do. Is it the one who goes back to North Korea?
Yeah, Chang-ho.
Yeah.
Kim Chang-ho.
Oh, Chang-ho. Okay, yeah. That also I felt could have been like kind of that, like you said, you need a separate story or you need a separate
The
thing.
romantic in me actually wanted him and Kunti to be together, but I think because the author coming from that historical angle and she has to bring in somebody going back to North Korea, I'm like, why do you have to do this?
Do this, yeah. And Kungi is such a nice, you know, she's nice Christian woman who believes in faithfulness. So it's like, anyway, yes.
I think Yosef is an Indian lah. He's
very likely
like an Indian typical husband.
Yeah, don't do this. Why is the woman working? Blah blah blah. Okay.
He was the most annoying character. I wanted him to die fast, but he lived on.
But he was such a good uncle, you know. I mean, in his own way, he was a good man. He wanted to provide for the family, and you know, he did whatever he could.
The pride.
No, the bit that really frustrated me with Yosef, because when he towards the end, when he was feeling, when he was looking back, you know, in hindsight, maybe he should have not brought King He. Maybe he should have not moved away, left his parents. Maybe he should not have brought his brother and yada yada. He was having all of this reflection of being all, you know, finally being humble And then suddenly, they say, oh, they're gonna go somewhere, work somewhere, and he's back to Yosef being annoying Yosef. Woman shouldn't work, yada yada. I'm like, wow, what happened to your reflection? What happened to your invalidness? Calm down. So yeah, most of the men in the book were rather infuriating, but that's real life, isn't it? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. What about Hannah's father? He was also, he just kind of just kicked out of the house, right? The mother, because of the letters he found or something. That was also quite interesting. Remember?
Yeah, yeah. I felt like if the whole book were okay, no, if the whole book were, because it started off as, you know, fine, woman suffering or whatever, but if she would just stayed on that course somewhat, you know, there's just too many things going on. And as Sis mentioned earlier, she read Kim Jin Yong, born 1982. I would actually be interested to read that after this and compare, because Kim Jin Yong is a feminist book set in our modern times. So, you know, it's interesting to compare how how the current Korean woman would feel right now, because that book was like Kim Jin Young itself. That book was electric. Like people, like there was this K-pop idol that recommended this book, and then the whole trove of male fans went and burned her pictures and threatened her to die and whatnot. So you know that would be interesting to
But Aisha, did you watch the movie?
What movie? Kim Jin Young?
Yeah.
No.
Because
I
actually,
read books first.
The book and the movie is actually totally different.
Yeah, that's why I read the book first, but I haven't read the book yet.
Yeah, you read the book first lah. But it's a good,
Yeah.
it's about how the women were oppressed.
Oh, women suffering, normal story. Okay. All right. So yeah, does anybody want to say anything before we leave? Because it's already 5. So anybody wants any
Yeah,
last
just
things to
a
say?
quick,
Yes, yes.
quick thing about a similar situation in Iran, unfortunately.
Okay.
We behave just as hideously towards Afghan refugees in the 21st century. It is unforgivable. And I should say worse, because looking at this book, Koreans had this opportunity of growing wealthy, becoming Pachinko owners, or I suppose other businesses, whereas Afghans in Iran don't have that opportunity. And looking at this, sort of like what happened with the registry in that guy's first 11th birthday, Solomon, things like that is quite ordinary in Iran. In fact, if an Iranian woman married an Afghan man, their child wouldn't have any kind of citizenship. He or she wouldn't be given an ID card. So they wouldn't have been able to go to school. Only this year the law changed.
So who wouldn't get an ID card?
The child of an Iranian woman and an Afghan refugee, right? Okay. So if it is reversed, if the man is Iranian and the woman is Afghan, it's okay. But the law has changed, thankfully. So yeah, when I read this book, it rang so many bells.
Okay, so anything else, Guy, before we go off? I'll go one by one again quickly.
Actually, for the same note, in Korea, if the mother is not present, you cannot get a birth certificate for the child. Regardless of whether it's a national or whatever. So there's a lot more undocumented, even born of nationals, if it's a single father and mother is not present. So the same could be said if it's a foreigner.
What if the mother dies?
Then you bring in a girlfriend.
In childbirth, yeah.
Suppose a death
Then
certificate.
you have the birth certificate. You have the death certificate
Oh,
to prove
yeah.
it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's easy.
Yeah.
Never mind, Shahna.
Okay. So we're going. So Guy, any last things you want to say? I mean, anything today about the book or anything else?
Yeah, I think it's fine. Yeah, but really enjoy all the different viewpoints, because I think it's very difficult to write a book like this. The author really did try her best, but she should decram it a bit. And all the authors in the room, please write something from Malaysia. Because Malaysian
She should
has a
marry
lot of
Kondo it.
Are you talking to me?
yes,
My book hasn't even come out yet.
And Malaysia has a lot of this kind of thing going on, you know. Even for Malay, you know, Malay is trying to assimilate all the different kind of like races as well. There are a lot of stories here. The Orang Asli as well, you know, like
Yeah,
the Chinese.
definitely.
Yes.
So I think we should have something like this for Malaysia. This is our story, you know. We should have something like that.
Yes. So all of us should write the stories and compile it. Okay, we go to you, Steph. Anything? Murag? CB?
Okay.
Okay.
You say
Yeah,
that
yeah.
later. You know what, as well? It reminded me of The Rice Mother, and I didn't like it for the same reasons, actually.
Okay. Okay. All right.
You forgot to compare this to The Good Earth.
Yes, I was just going to say that. Okay, hold on. So CB, anything before we go off?
No, not from me.
Okay, Karuna.
Oh, my takeaway message is marry a priest, have an affair with a gangster.
Why you're condemning that? Okay. Please don't listen to him. But anyway, yeah. Yes, May. What about you, May?
To what Karuna had said, what is it? Marry a priest and have an affair with a gangster, and go the rest of your life to pay for your sins.
Yeah, true. Add on to that.
No, you have the rest of your life to do confession.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, true. Yes, May, you want to say anything else?
I just want, actually, I read this book because I had this book. Someone gave it to me. So because this year there are some books that I've decided not to read and skip, and
oh dear.
And this was one of the books that, because I had a copy, so I read it, and I have to thank whoever who recommended it, because this is my version, because it throws a lot of light about the animosity between the Koreans and the Japanese in a way which I never knew about, and which I don't think I would ever know about, and all the bits of info here and there. So I thank you for recommending this book. Yeah, thanks. That's
Okay,
all.
thanks, May. Why ye? Anything? Or Chan? Yeah.
Happy to meet everyone today, and a very enlightening conversation about the book. Yeah, I look forward to more of these meetings.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. We look forward to having you here also. Okay, Azita?
Just that Good Earth popped
Good
into
Earth
my
thingy.
mind.
Okay. Yeah, she's like quite similar to that. Okay, CB? CB?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm
Azhar?
good. Thank you.
Dato, anything?
I'm very confused, but never mind.
Are you going to read it?
Okay, yeah, I think
I'm going to summarize it.
came through. Okay, you're going to write about today's discussion. Okay, what about you, Tick?
Many of you might not agree with me, but I think the fact that there are many characters in it, I think that is kind of a necessity for this book as well, in the sense that I think she wants to show the complexity of that psychological between being an outcast and all.
Yeah. Okay. And then what about? Thank you, Tick, sis. What about you?
nothing from me. But nice to see Kak Jaja again. Lama tak jumpa.
Oh. Aisha, anything?
I hope she improves as a writer.
Okay, we wait for her next book.
No, I mean, she's a good researcher. You can tell that. Because it's a good topic to write about, and yeah, there's this thing. What I take from this is that I know we read this and we be like, oh, the Japanese is so atrocious, yada, yada, but like, there was once there's this K-pop idol. He's Japanese, you know, and
Yes.
he got confronted with this question about comfort woman and whatnot. And this is quite a, it's quite a difficult, a pickle of a position to be in, especially in front of television or whatnot. And he's from the younger generation, and then his reply is that, well, the Japanese government should continue to just apologize until that thing is being accepted. Which is, I guess that's how we should, like how Germans and when we come, it's such a difficult topic, right? When we talk about Nazism and the Holocaust and then all of this colonization and whatnot, but up until am I putting myself in a precarious position to say this? Never mind. Up until what point do we carry that? Right? Do you get what I mean? Because especially when it comes to stereotype, right? Do we wait until that generation that suffered through that, that war to die out, then maybe we can start establish a different kind of dynamic, maybe with that history. I don't know. So I always like to think about how do we move forward. You know what I mean? Because isn't that what history is all about? Like because if literature like this keeps on coming out and people are reading it for the first time and then they'll be like appalled about it, like, oh, I can't believe this is what they do, and yada, and then you have this idea. So when does this forgiveness begin? Oh, well, I know it's atrocious, but you get what I mean, right? When does this forgiveness begin, and when does the new history begin, and when do we move forward? Yeah, I guess that's usually this is what I think about when I read this one. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I just want to share something that Anita couldn't be here because she had to go off for some errands, but this is what she wrote, so just sharing it with you. Number one, I neither loved it nor hated it. Number two, Azita, I think, mentioned the good earth. I can see similarities, but I will never forget the good earth. I can't decide if this is because I read the good earth when I was younger and hence will remember it more. I don't know if I will remember this book. Okay, and then I was glad to come to the end of it. Number three, the plot was very predictable. I knew that the father of the baby would reject her and when she became pregnant, and that she would marry the pastor fellow. Not reject in the sense that he wouldn't like take her back there. And it was clear that the elder brother would suffer overly from excess male pride. And the women there, you have Indians there again, and the women would have to find money on their own. A lot of it was predictable. Then the number four, what was interesting was the description of the place and the history. Again, though, this history, though thorough, wasn't as stark, can't think of a better word, as in the earth of mankind. So this was her take on generally. So for the new people here, Wai, she's one of our members and she's also a writer. So this is what she wrote. Okay, for me, one of the things that really stood out, which I enjoyed, is a very small thing, but it is something so similar to my culture, and I think something similar to yours. It was the 100-day ceremony where the little boy went and took, yes, because we have this. Yeah, we have this at the end of the third month for the boy babies and the fourth month for the girl children, because we use the odd and even numbers. And we have exactly the same thing. So we put out metal, which is supposed to signify gold or whatever. Then we put out, you know, money. Then we put out book. And every time my two children were touching, I said, touch the book, please. You know, it is, or a pen. You know, we put a pen there. So it's very interesting what the children pick up. So
for us, it's when the first tooth comes out.
Yeah, for them it's the first tooth. For us, when they start on what you call solid food, as in away from milk, you know. So usually end of the 3rd or the 4th month. So consider 100 days. So
In
I
the Ali Shafa book has that too, right?
yes,
The 10
yes,
minutes,
and
whatnot.
yes, and a lot of Indian English writers will have that as well. So my takeaway basically, like Guy said, yeah, it is not an easy thing to pack all those things in. I think I appreciated the fact that she put all those things in, and as Tick said, I think you needed those characters, because we call this like community writing. So when you're writing about communities, you know, you can't help but put in people from different sections, and this is even bigger because it's generations, right? So like I said, there are lots of, I think I mentioned to some of you, there are lots of plus minus points as well. Okay, yeah, but she could have like done something about maybe the writing style, or maybe cut down some episodes or make it smaller. And of course the F word thingy really was not necessary, I felt, but then you know, it's just thing. So yeah, thank you all. Anybody wants to say anything else before we say bye? And thank you. This is a good start to the year. Nice discussion. And it's our first discussion for PBC, right? Yeah. Yes. Anybody, anything? Then we'll just say bye and
No,
see
thank
you.
you. Sorry
See
for
you.
interjecting a
Thank you.
lot.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks a lot.
See you guys.
Thanks
Take
a lot.
care.
Okay, bye-bye. See you.
Bye.
See you. Okay, I need to brace myself. Okay.
The narrative
Okay.
was really honestly, it almost sent me into a decline, that book. It was like unrelentingly depressing.
How depressing. How depressing.
Oh yeah, it's I think between it and Jude the Obscure are the two most depressing books I've ever read.
Which one?
Yeah, yes. Jude
That
the
is
Obscure was.
LV's, right? The February book for PBC, I think, is the Plow book.
Yes, yes, the plow.
Yeah, that's
Bogata Carter.
Oh, yeah, the narrow road. She's really okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Bye.